Luke Malek, how are you, sir?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I've been looking forward to this because you dabble in or go deep in areas I dabble, but a lot of them. We're talking healthcare, we're talking drug reform, we're talking corrections, all kinds of stuff. You are an attorney by trade. You were in the legislature for 6 years. You are now on the Board of Corrections, which oversees the Department of Corrections. We'll talk about that one at a later date. But today we're kind of chatting about healthcare and issues around that in the state of Idaho.
Yeah, absolutely.
So hit me with the problems, man. I mean, obviously we're not clocking it at the top with physician to patient ratios.
Yeah, absolutely. I think always when you're talking about healthcare, you're talking about, do we have access for people? And I think that's the largest thing that we're facing across the nation, but also specifically right here in Idaho. I mean, access is the number one issue. So we don't have enough physicians. We have limited resources. So how are we going to get healthcare to people?
Yeah, and I've mentioned this a couple times. I had a really this is really near and dear to me. I have three boys, and one of them had to see a specialist, a pediatric specialist, and we were very anxious about getting him in. He's fine, like everything's fine, but we didn't know that. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. We didn't know that initially, so we called our healthcare provider, which is a major one in the Treasure Valley, and they're like, "Yeah, we have that specialist in 4 months." We're like, how do you mean 4 months? And this was not the type of thing that we felt comfortable waiting 4 months. And so, my wife, being the hammer she is, gets on the phone and essentially gets us lined up with Stanford and Salt Lake Children's Hospital, like almost instantaneously within weeks.
Yep.
And we end up availing ourselves of one of those options. But the real thing that made me stop and think is like, what if you're a family that does not have the capacity to do that? Like we had to travel out of state. And then you had to figure out reimbursement. Is this covered by our insurance? Do we have to get like a referral and all these different problems? It's like, wow. And this isn't even a wild, crazy specialist. This is one that like pretty much everybody would understand is likely going to be utilized at some point. So that really gave me pause where it's like, and we live in the Treasure Valley, man.
Yep. And that story can go both ways. And I hear it all the time. I mean, if your healthcare access is boiling down to who you know or how smart you are to outwork the system, then the system is broken, right? And it's been that way for a long time. I would say that we've gotten better in a lot of ways, and part of that is building out our safety net in the state of Idaho, but a lot of that is not depending on direct physician access. And you're right, once you get into a really complicated situation, and you have hours or days or weeks and not months, and you're told that you have months to get out there, I mean, there are drastic consequences for a lot of people because of that lack of access.
So the access comes down to, like first principles, right? Like we don't have access because we don't have the thing, right? Mm-hmm. We don't have doctors to then access.
Yes.
Right. It's not a barrier necessarily of cost, because it's not like we have these 100 doctors waiting over here. You just don't have the money to see them. It's like, no. The doctors physically do not exist in the state of Idaho.
Right.
It's insufficient numbers.
And we were talking a little bit before we went online, but we're ranked 50th in the nation in terms of physicians per capita here in the state of Idaho. It's a dire situation.
Now, that concept has drawn a lot of attention because what physicians have talked about in responses of why they're not coming here, Idaho politics is a really big issue. People usually just use reductionist logic to say, okay, well, these are people that just want to perform abortions all day long, every day. But there are a lot of aspects of Idaho politics outside of pregnancy and pregnancy termination that affect how somebody could see an area, like politics around how doctors are viewed in general, right? Like we had Ammon Bundy a couple years back surrounding a St. Luke's site saying that they were human trafficking. It's like, if you're a doctor, do you want to come into a state where a governor candidate is accusing a hospital system and a police department of trafficking a child, right? Like, is that favorable politics or politics around education? Right? Doctors like education.
When we talk about recruiting physicians here, I mean, they're humans just like you and I are. So, they know at some point in time, it's going to be their time to have access to healthcare for them, or more importantly, oftentimes their family. So knowing that sort of panic you can feel when you don't have access to what it is that you need can be a major mental barrier to saying, well, I love Idaho. As a physician, I would love to be able to practice and contribute to that, but what's the impact on my family going to be by moving here? So I think that plays a lot into the psychology of people who are looking to move here. Do we have the educational? Do we have the healthcare resources that we need to have the quality of life that I want for my kids?
Speaking of that, you are engaged in a lot of different areas of healthcare, but what are the struggles specifically with rural Idaho and attracting physicians there? Because there's a big movement across the state. It's like, we got to get physicians, we got to get specialists, we got to increase residencies in more densely populated areas so that those people will stay in Idaho and perhaps matriculate out to the more rural areas. Like, what are the big hangups at this point?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a lot of the challenges that we face overall as a state have an impact on our ability to get physicians in. So, I mean, it could be as simple as housing prices. I was in Cascade yesterday and went through there. They have a rural access hospital. They've now changed it to a different designation, but it's basically it's a hospital that is meant to serve that rural community, right? So it's structured specifically to say, okay, we're a community that has a lot of recreation and quite a few people that are over the age of 65, right? Of the people that they serve, something like 60% of them are on Medicare, so of retirement age or older, and so you have a population that is specifically there to recreate or to retire, and they have priced the housing at a level that is really difficult for a family to go there. So if I'm a physician looking to say, okay, I want to have this rural lifestyle, but it's going to be a lot more difficult for me to make a living and have housing in Cascade than it is to be in, wherever else. And then you start adding on, is it more complicated to get education for my children? Is it more am I going to get the education that I want for my children? Am I going to have access for my family to the healthcare that they need if they ever do need a specialist like you did in your situation? All of that starts to add up and too often leads to decision not to come to Idaho.
When you talk about a larger portion of people on Medicare, this is something that I didn't understand until a couple months ago. But when you start having larger portions of your population on Medicare, you start talking about like massively dwindling reimbursements for both the hospital and the physicians. And it shouldn't be that way, right? Because obviously when you hit retirement age, this is when you need the most medical care, statistically in your life. But it's also the time when people get paid the least to take care of you.
Yep.
How do we overcome that? Because especially in rural or recreation areas like you're talking about, it's like you can't, and Emmett suffers from something similar, right? It's not quite the same thing.
We talked about Chalice earlier. You can talk about Bonners Ferry. You can talk about Rigby. You can talk about St. Anthony. All of these places are great places to live, terrible places to get access to specifically specialty services.
So what do we do? Like, how do we attract doctors here then? Like, this is the question that, like, first off, let's start taking it apart. Housing prices. Like, what are we going to do? What can we do with housing prices?
We could probably have a whole podcast just on housing prices in the state of Idaho, right? I mean, 2020 changed everything for the state of Idaho. And welcome to everyone, but also,
oh my God, I'm part of the problem. I know.
I
I fully realize. I'm working on it. I'm sorry.
But beyond that, I mean, you're right. The complicated reimbursement system. I mean, if I were, I'm a business attorney, so I do advise a lot of businesses. And if I'm advising them, and they're starting up a healthcare business, I have a really hard time saying, you should take Medicaid as a payer or take Medicare as a payer, because the complexity to your business, the chances of getting a clawback for your business, and the low reimbursement rate to begin with. I mean, you're not signing up to make a profit. You're signing up to complicate your life at the end of the day. And that is a huge problem, particularly in the scarcity situation that we have here in the state of Idaho.
Explain the clawback. What do you mean?
Well, if there's any sort of billing abnormality with Medicare, the feds will come and take that money back. So now that's really, really high level. But I mean, the risk of making a mistake, whether that's intentional or not, and a lot of times I would argue from what I've seen, it's a miscoding or something along those lines. But
sure, human error is a real thing.
Yeah, mm-hmm, yep,
and so
very, very, very complicated billing, right?
Yeah, and so then the feds show up. They're like, "Give me that $50,000 back," and you're like, You just have to give it back, and then I assume you have to resubmit a bill.
50 grand is probably on the low end of the clawbacks that I've seen.
What
We're usually talking millions.
Wait, how? Like, what procedures or what billing mechanism would be required that it's like you filled out a form, or is this like over a period?
It's over a period of time.
So you find somebody who's been miscategorizing a certain procedure and done it at volume, and then they're like, "Hey, you screwed this one up, but you screwed it up 100 times, and each piece was $10,000. So now you owe us like $1 million back." So then that's the end of the practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and so again, there's great providers out there that take Medicaid and Medicare, and they do a good job of it. Even the best sometimes will face clawbacks. But if you this is why you're seeing consolidation in the healthcare realm, because it's so difficult to keep up with the compliance generally through healthcare, and just the complexity of doing business in the United States right now, and then you add the complexity of that billing and the potential for a mistake that could lead to a clawback. It's a pretty high risk venture for anybody that wants to go out and try and make a difference by starting a business.
So not only is the reimbursement lower by taking a lot of Medicare, but you also have the potential for, again, as you're articulating, clawbacks, which could be a practice killer. And so you have those two things. And on top of that, if you're in an area that has a higher retirement population, which leads to more Medicare recipients, you also likely have a lower investment in schools, smaller youth populations, fewer things for young people, because you're essentially dealing with like an aging retirement community.
Absolutely. And why would they want their tax dollars to go to a school that doesn't have any of their grandkids in it or their kids in it?
Man, that was one of the biggest things about the school choice that I got worried about this year. And again, I'm not taking a position on school choice, but the argument that people were making, which is the money should follow the kid, that I knew, like that principle of like, hey, this money is mine, and therefore it should reflect my needs more closely. Instantly, it's like that then just applies to somebody without kids. Because if you're saying the money should follow the kid, if you either never had kids or your kids are gone, then you're like, well, I don't want to pay for this. And like instantaneously you started seeing people that are older like, hey, I should not have to fund this portion of the state's population, because we don't have, like, you don't have anybody making a really good argument for collective benefit anymore. Nobody cares about that. Like if you don't have an individual value proposition for older people to pay for public education, then they're like, meh. Or I shouldn't say that about old people, but older people. I'm not trying to like old people. They're people too. Okay, Luke?
Not otherizing them.
Yeah, there it is. I was trying to not othering them. Yeah. But I mean, like that is a thing. So, okay, if this is a problem that Idaho is facing, other states have to be facing this. Right? I mean, like we're behind Arkansas and like Alabama for physician to patient ratio, right? How are they resolving this?
I think there's nationally a problem with that. But I think Idaho is in this unique position where we're not going to see the kind of housing prices in Arkansas that we see here in Idaho, right?
Like all the CalPERS, the retired people.
Yeah. I mean, it is a perfect storm here, and medical education. It's kind of a chicken and egg type thing. We dealt a lot with medical education during the legislative session this year. You can put medical student seats in the state of Idaho, but then because we have such a low number of physicians, how are you going to place them so that they can finish out their training post graduation from medical school? So they're doing their internships or you need to find preceptors for that. And so
even if
we end up sending them out of state, and then
they stay out of state.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously we don't even have an OBGYN residency program in the state of Idaho. So just by the nature of the specialty, we have to attract people from out of state. It's not like, well, I went to medical school here and like I did my residency here. Like maybe I don't love the politics. I guess I'll just stay. It's not even like you have to get people who, overtly come back.
Right. And we saw a lot of them leave in pretty dramatic fashion, post Roe being overturned. So, yeah.
It's interesting. People refuse to accept that. Or at least some people online absolutely overwhelmingly refuse to accept the idea that you could have legislation that would drive doctors out of the state. Oh, yeah. And of course, even if they accept it, they're like, yeah, but those are just the bad doctors. Mm-hmm. And it's like, Arkansas I think it's Arkansas and Alabama, both have stricter elective abortion laws. I think both of them, one or both of them, do not allow for exceptions of rape and incest. So let's make the categorization that they are more conservative when it comes to abortion than Idaho. They have OBGYNs. So the idea that like we could just get the OBGYNs that believe in pro-life, first off, there are plenty of those here, and they're saying unequivocally that the legislation is not necessarily conducive to good medicine. And other places also have this problem. So it's not like Idaho's this shining beacon of hope and like we're really the only morally defensible state in the country and like all of these doctors are just going to flock to us once they realize like we're the spot. It's like, no, man, we're like number 8 on the most conservative when it comes to abortion. There are 7 other far more conservative places to be. It's like you still have to attract people here. You can't browbeat them, and you can't deny that they're leaving, right?
Yep.
Or you
have to look at the problem as a whole, right? There's no one issue that we can point to here in terms of the problem that we're facing, and specifically in terms of how we're going to solve that problem.
So when you're talking about not having spots to continue training for medical students, so say we had a medical school like Idaho ponied up $500 million and we built a teaching hospital. We did it, right? And we get this teaching hospital and we start pumping out medical students like 100 a year. We got 100 a year. You graduate from medical school, you're not going to practice instantaneously like at St. Luke's. You're not going out to like open up your own practice. There are a lot of steps in between there and you being a board certified physician that can go open up a practice or do whatever, right? And part of those steps are having essentially like apprenticeships in the medical field, right? You have residencies and fellowships and whatnot where you follow and work with people that are in your specific specialty. You want to be a surgeon, internal medicine, you want to be a pediatrician, dermatologist. You got to go find a dermatologist.
Yep.
You got to go find a pediatrician and be like, please teach me.
Yep.
And those people, by the way, they also want to teach medical students, right? And we have residency programs right now going unfilled in the state of Idaho because they cannot woo the medical students. But be that as it may, we can't woo them from out of state. Say we had 100 right now. We still don't have enough people willing to open up the residencies to fit the need or fill the need that we have in Idaho. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you were dealing with, this is a conversation we had a lot during the legislative session this year, and I represent the University of Washington from a lobbying perspective, so I was a part of the...
You do?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
You're part of the woke problem.
Well,
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Can I just say something real fast? The number of people that criticized UW as a medical school because UW trains doctors in abortions. Now hang with me. And they're like, we are an anti-abortion state. We don't need doctors from up there. That is overwhelmingly the trashiest argument ever, because in the state of Idaho, if you have a young gal that's raped by her uncle, she can, if she elects to, get an abortion. That's state law. If you have a mother whose life is in danger, you need somebody who knows how to save her life. And if her life's in danger because of pregnancies, you have to abort the kid. Now, this is a horrible, horrible scenario that we're playing out, but we need doctors who know how to do it and do it really well and save people's lives. However infrequently that may happen, however upsetting the situation may be, fine. We still need those doctors. So the criticism of UW that it trains people in this procedure that we find reprehensible or morally questionable is not a reason to criticize the medical establishment, because it does something that saves lives. Like, good night, man. Like, I could not believe people were saying that.
Well, and part of it too is, I mean, we're just talking about a standardized curriculum, right? I mean, this is a curriculum that's taught in every allopathic medical school across the United States. So,
as opposed to osteopathic, right?
Correct. Yep.
Right.
Yeah. There's basically two different.
MD versus OD.
Yep. Exactly.
Right.
Yep. So, and my point in bringing up this debate is that, you know, a lot of that conversation really revolved around how do we find these seats like you're talking about to make sure that we're having the opportunities for people that are graduating from medical school. And I think one thing that we found was just having that conversation really reinvigorated the existing medical community to get them out and say, hey, we do want to do exactly like you're talking about and help train the next generation of physicians.
What was that conversation? Help me understand how that conversation goes.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it was, okay, so there was a lot of conversation around the medical education, because there's a lot of legislators, including Representative Manwaring. I don't know if you've had him on your show or not.
Haven't had the pleasure.
Yeah. So he's very, very interested in increasing the number of physicians that we have in the state of Idaho.
Can I get an amen?
Yeah, absolutely. And so he was really pushing this conversation and saying, we basically no excuses. I want to see more physicians being trained in the state of Idaho. And so that really forced a conversation with everybody in the medical community, UW, University of Utah, ICOM, and then the our state institutions here in the state of Idaho, to say, how are we going to raise the profile of medical education so that more people will come to the table? That conversation alone brought a lot of interest from the medical community to come out and help be part of that problem.
Because that was essentially a political signaling saying, hey, look, we need to fix this problem. We recognize this is a problem. We're committed to fixing it. And people were like, oh, they're starting to take it seriously.
Yep.
Like they're on that. And this was Representative Manwaring?
Yeah.
What's his district? Is he around here?
He's from Pocatello.
Dude, I got to get him out here.
Yeah,
I would love to have this conversation with him.
He's a fantastic legislator. Yeah.
So he started, or really forced a conversation to come out in public and be like, hey, we need to do this. So we have portions of our medical community that stepped in and were like, all right, look, this is like, love it or hate it, this is going to have to be part of my obligation to the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's conversations like that are going to help us move forward, right? And I think that's something we need to keep in mind in politics in general, is having the conversation, as frustrating as it can be to have the way we think challenged. It can help raise awareness. We were talking about education earlier, right? The very fundamental principle that public education is in the Constitution has come into question lately. I don't think we should shy away from that conversation. It's in there for a reason. Let's have a conversation about why education is in the Constitution, so we remember and we keep that front and foremost as we look at what a better future looks like for the state of Idaho.
I was having this conversation or a conversation around education this morning, and it's almost like there are two actual issues that have been conflated into one, right? You have some people that have an issue around the system and mechanism by which we educate people, the public school system, right? And yeah, homeschool, private school, fine. But like the vast majority of people are in public schools, right? And then then there's the idea of like the value of education as a whole. And these two things have become conflated. So people are like, hey, I don't like the public school system. Education is therefore bad. It's like, whoa.
We got to break this apart. Yeah.
That's not what's going on. You may not like the education system, but that doesn't mean being educated is a bad thing, right? And the joke I always put around, which is like a terrible joke, but I think it's funny anyway. It's like, look, how many gals with PhDs in computer science do you see walking around that elect to be prostitutes? Zero. It's like, they would never do it. It's like, I don't ever have to be around a dude I don't ever want to, because I can go make $1 gajillion being a computer scientist, and God bless you, girl. Like, go do it, right? But you have people that don't have PhDs in computer science, don't have marketable skills, and some of those people, both guys and gals, default down to the most base offering they have for the community: theft, crime, and prostitution, right? Like, you have drugs, you have people who's like, I can't get a job pipe welding, I don't know how to pipe weld, and I got flat feet, I can't go into the service, like all of a sudden, it's like, well, I can make some money selling this thing or whatever it might be. But the more options we give people, the fewer of those people that will elect for the worst possible option, right? And so we just have to make these other options attainable and attractive. And that's the nature of education. You can contribute in a tolerable, acceptable way to our communities. In the absence of capacity to contribute, you end up like prostitution and crime.
Yeah, or any number of ills. I mean, it's self-medicating.
Right.
And yeah.
And dude, and we have to take care of those people anyway. That's the great irony. Right? Like, if somebody rolls up to the emergency room because they're homeless and it starts snowing and they say they have chest pains, they know they're getting a meal and they're getting a warm cot.
Well, we're right back to where we started, right? It's that investment in making sure that we have a healthy population, which means we have to have access to healthcare and the things that lead to better health outcomes as a whole. So, this is part of this is I'm very passionate about healthcare because my parents were both physicians. So I grew up around these conversations about how access to particularly primary care really has an impact on a person's ability to succeed in life generally. So
how is that just because it's kind of like if you have better dental, you have better personal hygiene, you have fewer illnesses, you'll miss less school, you're more likely to, be engaged in pursuits outside of just
absolutely. I mean,
low-level health.
Any one of those things that you listed, whether it's your teeth, your eyes, your general health, any of those things, your mental health,
right,
that fails, and all of a sudden you're way behind in terms of being able to make a good life for yourself.
Man, how brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we don't have that access. And, my mom helped start a free clinic up in Coeur d'Alene when we first moved to the state in 1987. And
you're a transplant. Okay. I'm not going to listen to you.
Yeah. From Wyoming.
Transplant. Transplant nonetheless. Somebody said that to me online. They're like, I see you transplant 3 strikes. I'm okay, man. Like, what's so funny? The whole show is not even about my position. The whole show is about like getting experts. It's like, you can be mad at me. I'm just an idiot holding the marketplace of ideas. Like, well, I don't even have a good idea. I'll tell you that right now. Don't look to me. And if you want to say I'm an idiot, I'll be the first to admit it. You're barking at the wrong person, man. Whatever. It's Instagram.
Well, yeah. I mean, I really appreciate that you're having these conversations. I mean, it's great to have the access to this. So
yeah. Anyway, you were saying your mom.
Oh yeah, no. 87. So I mean, there'd be people lined up.
You were the
around
original
the street.
problem.
Yeah, exactly. I moved when the population boom started then. People would be lined up around the street with devastating illnesses, right? That a lot of times couldn't be resolved in the amount of time that they had. And so it was, we are making progress, but it's also been a source of passion for what I do and what our firm does, and even the lobbying that I do. And so I get fairly passionate. Yeah.
It's like, and I don't want to interrupt. Like if you're talking about devastating illnesses, where was the access to just like go to the hospital? Like if somebody has some horrific illness, was it that like the hospital is only interested in stabilizing them, and from that point on, they're like, no, you're going to have to go see your primary, and they're like, we don't have a primary, and we're probably bankrupt now from this emergency room visit.
Correct, 100%. I mean, you go back to that point in time, and it was you were on the hook for whatever your emergency room bill was. So if you go in because you've got a lump in your stomach, and sometimes you don't even want to find out what that is, because if it ends up being cancer, and I'm thinking of a specific instance, right? It's like somebody looks pregnant, but it's actually stomach cancer that's just distended their stomach to that level, right? So, I mean, I think in a lot of ways we have a lot to be hopeful for, because we do have a different system now where people have some coverage and that kind of stuff, and that access, there has been more emphasis on that access. But you still see people being completely derailed by the very things we're talking about. Dental, having access to dental care, which has an impact on your behavioral health, or if you have an underlying mental illness, you're medicating with fentanyl or whatever. I mean, it's alcohol. It can completely derail your life.
Gosh, man, that's brutal.
Yeah.
So what do we do then, right? Like we have representatives starting to pay attention, right? We have made progress, let's say in the last 40 years.
Absolutely.
Right? We're better now than we were apparently in 87.
Yeah.
Or at least we're not in Coeur d'Alene, I'd assume. They're a little bit better. But we're still 50th. And this is the thing that I keep coming back to, that I've really been thinking about like the last month, which is, look, other places have these problems. Now, I understand what you're saying, which is, okay, look, Arkansas may not be the hotbed destination for like a lot of California retirees, the state that shall not be named, that I named by accident. It's like, and this state is, right? So is Arizona, right? There are areas in Arizona that are very, very attractive to people.
Yep.
So you have people that bring up an artificially inflated income because it was determined by a different cost of living. And that goes a lot longer here, obviously. And that makes a housing market and a goods and services market that is wrapped around an income that you cannot easily replace here, which I totally understand. I've had these really upsetting instances, upsetting to me, watching people move up here. And they leave their jobs, right? Like I did. I had nothing. I had no employment when I moved up here. And I was like, I believed in it very much for my family. And I was like, I'm going to figure something out. But you get to a point eventually where you're like, hey, you're not figuring anything out that you thought you were going to. Like they aren't just these jobs sitting around here that pay $150,000. You can get a job for like 50, but it's not going to afford you the lifestyle that you thought you were going to have when you moved here, because you're like, oh, everything's cheaper in Idaho, which I have realized is not.
Yeah.
Is not. Like I went to I was down, in the place for Easter, seeing family, and my wife and I love Pete's Coffee. There's no Pete's Coffee here. So whenever we go down there, we get Pete's Coffee. Like I get a large every 2 hours. Like it's just, I am all in. And I go to get it. It's just large. It's like a big gulp, 64 ounce like of coffee. And it's like $4. And I go to a coffee shop on 13th Street, the next week, and it's $4.10 for a medium.
Yep.
Right. And I go to another coffee shop in Eagle, the week prior, and it was $6 for a coffee this big. Now it was specialty a little bit, but it was this big. Yeah. And I was like, how is this possible? So the idea that things are more affordable here, at least in the Treasure Valley, is overwhelmingly not true.
Correct.
Like you might get a slightly bigger house for, let's say around the same amount of money, but everything else, it's like you're going to get eaten up by your daily expenses.
Absolutely. And when I first started my law firm, that was one of the things we touted as we were trying to recruit people. It was like, we got a great quality of life and lower cost of living, and you just got to cross out that last part. Yeah.
Red line.
Yeah.
It got red line.
It does not exist anymore. It really has changed.
What do you attribute that? Like, I understand the cost of housing, but what do you attribute the cost of like groceries and goods and services here? Like, that's astronomically expensive. Is it just based on people coming up with a glut of equity from, home sales, and so they can afford these types of things for a certain duration of time?
Yeah. I'm not an economist, so I'm speculating here,
You're supposed to know everything.
Yeah. But I mean, I do think it's what the market will bear, right? I mean, retailers can get those prices, and so they do. And they're having to maintain wages for their employees that are having to pay for that housing and so on and so forth. I mean, it's just the state of things has changed entirely across the board. It's just more expensive to live here now.
Gosh, man, it's a wild time.
It really is.
It's a wild time. So what else can be done then? Like when I'm talking to people about politics and the desirability of Idaho, we have a high cost of living. Okay, we have certain places in particular that are exacerbated, but an aging population, right? Which leads to lower reimbursements and fewer services for instance, their potential family or their growing family.
Yeah.
Okay, those are two big things. We cannot change. Do you think there's anything we do for cost of housing? Probably not. I mean, like developers are going ham left and right to build places. Okay, so we can't do anything about that. We can't really do much about the Medicaid reimbursement. Right. We can collectively as communities affect how we address social services and social goods, community goods that affect children.
Yep.
Like we can invest in parks. We can invest in education systems, right? Like Middleton's trying to run a bond right now. And it's like, if the aging population there wants doctors, it would be good to have a quality education system for those doctors to attend, have their kids to attend. Yeah.
I do. I think education is absolutely critical. I mean, it's critical across the board. It's the number one indicator of healthcare outcomes, for example, is your education, right? So absolutely, education is one of the things that I mean, at least from the anecdotes that I know, providers, if they're looking to move to Idaho, they want to know that they're going to have a good education for their kids.
So in rural places like Chalice or Salmon or name whatever rural area you want, like Council, right?
Or Cascade, where I was yesterday.
There you go.
Yep.
At least one thing that we can affect is making sure we provide and maintain a quality public education system, because that's likely going to be the thing that the young doctor who's trying to grow a family is going to want to see.
Absolutely. Okay. And I think, and just reiterating that point, that's the importance of having the conversation. Why is providing for a public education in the Idaho Constitution, right? There are people who say that we should take it out. Let's have that conversation, because I think it'll help delineate exactly what you were talking about, which is how do we separate the anxiety and frustration that we have about a curriculum versus the value of an education overall. And we really have to emphasize the value of education overall.
You are engaged in conversations in multiple states. Okay, at least one happens to be blue, and this one happens to be really red.
Yep.
I have to assume there's also, at least in part, a community sentiment towards the medical system with faith and belief and deferential attitude,
Yeah.
tempered, of course, juxtaposed to like, you're part of this mechanism that's trying to kill all of us, right? That has to play in, and I know that's very bastardized and reductionist, but I think there is some truth to that, at least a little bit. Like there's an enormous amount of not skepticism, but distrust, like overt distrust
Absolutely.
in this state towards the medical establishment. Not like, hey, I would like to know what study you got that from, or like, hey, I would like to be informed as I consent. It's like, no, you're out to get me, right? That if you're a physician trying to look at a place that you're going to call home, that has to factor into it, where it's like, okay, do I want to go somewhere where people are going to be antagonistic towards me right out of the blocks?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I think the real conversation we need to have has to take both aspects of those perspectives into consideration, right? Because if we just ignore the concerns of people that do have concerns, we're just going to drive a wedge deeper. That's why having the conversation is absolutely so important.
Yeah. I'm actually working with trying to set up a vaccine series, which I'm really excited about. So working with the health community in this state, there's no way that I could give, like looking back on it, I didn't know what all the vaccines were that they were talking about when I was a kid or when, my kids were younger. And that's a real problem. And I think that inability to understand causes just inherently distrust and skepticism. Now, look, if there are like 60 vaccines for kids, in between the ages of 0 and like 18, if there are like 60 vaccines on that schedule, even if you spent a minute on each individual vaccine and a pediatrician's like, okay, and this is the next disease, and like, this is the next, like, first off, I'd black out after 10 minutes. Like, I wouldn't be able to ingest it all. Plus, there's no pediatrician who has that amount of time. Plus, 1 minute on a large question like this is insufficient completely, right? So I am like engaged in outlining and executing on this project where it's like, okay, what if we had a 20-minute conversation around each individual disease, vaccine, all the stuff, and they were available for people as they got closer to the time. So say like your wife is pregnant, you collectively are pregnant, and she's like, you got 3 months until you're going to have a kid, and your physician's like, hey, in the first 24 hours of life, we're going to talk to you about these 3 vaccines. So watch this awesome conversation. You can listen to it in your car, wherever you want, but this will help you get up to speed and get you the information that I'm pretty sure you're going to want to have. And then you can really make informed consent and pepper these through with everyone leading up to the times when they're going to be asked about these well checks, first year, second year, whatever they might be. Man, that would create an informed populace.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would bridge a big gap.
Again, having the conversation is so important. So the value of what you're doing. Absolutely.
Well, I mean, I haven't done yet.
Well, but I mean, just the podcast as a whole. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you feel that way.
I do.
I get a lot of hate mail sometimes.
Yeah, well,
it is what it is. So, education. What else do you think doctors are looking for that Idaho is coming up short on?
I think support for the medical community, right? It's
that community attitude.
Yep, absolutely. And I do think that was the value of the conversation that was had about graduate medical education and even 345, the bill that had Medicaid reform, right? There was a lot of conversations about how that impacted healthcare. And I think the more we can have the conversations, the more the medical community is going to feel supported by the politics. So that's not to say that we should shut down the skeptics. I mean, they need to be at the table having part of the conversation too, right? And a lot of their concerns are valid. I mean, I think we will admit that there's a lot of things that we can say we didn't get that right when it came to the scientific community and that kind of thing. And we still have to support the scientific community because that's what makes us healthier and prolongs our life and makes us have a higher quality of life. So
yeah, I really want to do a cancer series as well because I'm friends with an oncologist, and cancer is a really terrible thing. And I have a friend who just recently went through having one of his kidneys removed. Super healthy guy, works out all the time, and he was like, I guess I pulled a muscle, and then all of a sudden he was like, oh, I'm pissing blood.
Yes.
Like, oh my God. And the kidney, I guess, was like the size of a grapefruit, and they took it out. And again, he's doing fine, but there is a problem with people not understanding or knowing, and I'm not saying I understand or know, but not understanding anything about cancer until it happens.
Yep.
And at that point, it's this hyper emotional drinking from a fire hose, scrambling, trying to figure out what the right thing to do to save your life is.
Yep.
And it's my understanding there are places in the world that tout like, oh, we can fix all of this. Just come to us. And the established medical community is like, hey, that's not 100% true, but we don't have the education beforehand that we can ingest in a sober-minded manner to determine if we're being sold snake oil or not. And, like we should have that education access. We should have a little bit of that information, or at least start that conversation before people find themselves in a bad situation.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And this all comes down to just having the conversation around it.
And if you don't have that base level of trust because you've never had a conversation, you're gonna make jaded decisions about your own health or your family member's health, for sure.
Yeah, because we have a big cancer center in downtown Boise as well, right? Like we have like a big monument down. It's like near the zoo or something, right? Like right on the Riverwalk. I remember seeing that years ago. I was like, wow, man, they really invested into like helping people understand that there's really quality healthcare, at least for this specialty here.
Yeah.
So attitude towards the medical community, right? We cannot expect doctors to come here if the community at large doesn't trust doctors and hates them.
Correct.
Okay, great. Anything else? Education, attitude towards them, antagonistic legislation.
Yeah, I mean, I think they want to feel secure. Recognizing that physicians are humans, I think, is a huge part of this, right? I mean, you want to feel secure. I want to feel secure. Physicians want to feel secure as well. So just feeling secure that they're going to have a high quality of life when they move here, and that their kids, they're going to have a good place to raise their families. So
yeah,
that
makes sense. There's a lot.
Yeah,
there's a lot, and this, by the way, holds true. Not just, the emphasis of people talk a lot about rural versus urban. This really holds true for the rural communities, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And it's perhaps even a bigger, heavier lift for the rural communities because they don't necessarily have the tax base and the education funding to supply these things right out of the blocks.
Yep.
But we do have rural reimbursement programs and things of that nature for people that do want to engage in that, and they can get tuition reimbursed over a certain period of time.
Yep. National Health Service Corps will do tuition reimbursement for physicians that take on those rural assignments, and
right.
And we have the state loan repayment program as well. So
we have a state one as well.
We do, yeah.
Oh, look at that, man!
Yeah.
Is that the 4-year one where it's like 25% per year?
Oh, I don't remember the details.
Come on, man, you're supposed to know this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to know it.
Yeah, I did when I was on JFAC, but I don't remember now. Yeah.
My God. Yeah. So bottom line is we're working towards it. We need to keep the conversation going. We just need to listen too. I feel like, and if I may interject my own, it's like the number of times I've heard people that either are doctors or work with doctors report like, this is what doctors want. And the number of people in the community, they're like, that's not true. Like, how do you mean? Like, it came from the horse's mouth. Like that you could get no more clear representation of what this person is telling you they want. I mean, it's like, we got to work that out. We got to figure out a way for everybody to work together.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, Luke, listen, we got another cool 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 conversations. I'm very confident. I want to talk corrections next time.
All right.
If
Sounds
you're game
good.
for it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Is there anything you want to hit here at the end?
Well, I would say, just tying that together, I mean, having a safe community is something that's important to physicians as well. So we're really supporting our law enforcement community and making sure that that is something, that we can tout as Idahoans, is making sure that we have a safe state for people to raise their kids.
Man, that one, I got really down the other day. I was talking to somebody and they're like, well, we support law enforcement. I'm like, no, we don't. We like to say we support you, but we don't like to pay for you. Yeah. We don't like in the legislature, right? Like ISP used to be 1 officer per 4,500 citizens. Now it's 1 officer per 6,500 citizens, right? Like we're stretching our law enforcement resources thinner and thinner. And like if we want better law enforcement, we're going to have to pay for better law enforcement. And there's a large contingent of the population that's like, I don't want to pay any more for anything. And it's like, guys, like the Idaho is awesome because it's safe and it only stays safe.
Yep.
Yeah. Like we got to keep it safe. And we can work to decrease the criminals by investing in education and other things that have a strong correlation to keep people out of a life of crime. We can invest there, or we can invest in law enforcement and Department of Corrections. That's fine too. But like, it's going to cost us money somewhere.
It has to. We have to support the ecosystem as a whole, because that's it, when it starts to break down at any level, including public defenders, by the way. I mean, we have to make sure that we are supporting the entire system, because when we don't, that's when the system starts to break down, that's when the criminal element thrives.
Well, maybe our next conversation.
Yeah, sounds
Luke,
good.
I appreciate you. Thank you for coming in, sir.
Yeah, my pleasure.